We're going to go ahead and go. Good evening. I'd like to open the Union County Board of Commissioners special meeting for Thursday, July the 29th, 2021 at 6 p.m. As usual, I'd like to open the meeting with an invocation, and if you'd care to bow with me, I'd appreciate it. Dear Heavenly Father, you're indeed the giver of all gifts, and we come together this day to seek your wisdom, guidance, and courage. Guide us to ensure that we are transparent and provide the true facts for our citizens. Give us the insight to lead with integrity, that our decisions may reflect what is right and good. Please give special protection to the military, police, firemen that risk their lives to ensure our safety. Finally, dear Lord, grant us the humility to always seek your will in all that we do and say. In thy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Stand for the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first and only item will be discussion regarding the FY 2021 revenue projections and related matters. And Blake, if you'll come help us with that, please, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Helms, Vice Chairman Rafe, and members of the board. It's my pleasure to be here today to share some information and details on the revenue projection of the FY21 budget process. Before we get into the details of the presentation, I'd like to define some terms to hopefully clarify some questions that have been raised. But I want to direct you to the bottom of the first slide to a couple of concepts I want to make sure that we understand. The first item you'll see there is what's listed as the County General Fund. The County General Fund includes all general fund sub-funds, both revenues and expenditures. And so by state statute, every county is only allowed to have one general fund. That general fund is made up of several sub-funds or several subcomponents of that fund, which include budget needs for different purposes throughout the county. So the second bullet you'll see there are the individual sub-funds that, when you stack them together or package them together, make up the overall county general fund. And the sub-funds that make up the overall county general fund are the general government fund, which is Fund 101. That's the number assigned to it, so we can keep track of the items in there. The General Government Fund, Fund 101, is where the county has the funding required for county departments, county operations, and to maintain and operate the county. That's where that's housed. The only departments that are not included in Fund 101 are our enterprise departments, which are Public Works and Solid Waste. We don't mix enterprise funds with government funds. So we have Fund 101, which is the General Government Fund. Also, then we have the Radio Fund, which is Fund 102, the Countywide Fire Fund, which is 103, the EMS Fund, which is 104, the Schools Fund, which is 105, and Debt Service Fund, 106, and the Economic Development Fund, 107. And again, this is the structure that existed in FY21, and we'll talk a little bit later about how that changed a little bit in FY22. I want to restate that the General Government Fund, which is Fund 101, again, is a sub-fund that, when added to the other funds that were listed, make up the larger county general fund. And the table that you see at the top of the slide is a representation, which actually is a revenue projection that I provided to the board back, I think, in April or May, after the first 3 quarters of the fiscal year. We took a look at the adopted budget, the revised budget of those revenues, and based on what we collected so far and based on historical comparison, I projected forward where I thought those revenues would end up at the end of the fiscal year, and that's what you see there. This view is all of our revenues inside the General Government Fund, only Fund 101. This doesn't depict all of the sub-funds I mentioned. This only depicts the information in Fund 101 or the General Government Fund. You'll see the top row is listed as ad valorem taxes and fees, That's the revenue that we collect from the county property tax. That's what's yielded from the county property tax, the top row. Since this includes all revenue sources in the General Government Fund 101, it also includes sales tax, other taxes, intergovernmental revenues from federal and state sources, and so on and so forth. I want you to look at the bottom of that table in the yellow highlights to see what the total amount of all revenues in this singular fund. We adopted with a total of $169.3 million. Then at the point of this projection, which was through March 31st of 2021, the budget had been amended up to $176.3 million. And the next line there at $183.1 million is the final revised budget or amended budget through the end of the fiscal year, or June 30th. Now, before I move on, I want you to, the reason those numbers are highlighted in yellow is because they correspond to other numbers on slides that you'll see, so you can see that those numbers track across each of the slides to make sure that we can compare the comparable numbers there between slides. The table you see at the top of this slide is the county general fund, which is the larger fund I mentioned, with the individual sub-funds listed vertically going down. So you'll see the first row there at the top, it listed 101, or the general government fund, and that's the individual sub-fund where all of our county government departments are included, with those revenues and expenditures, personnel cost, operating cost, all of those items. And you'll see those highlighted numbers correspond to the previous slide, showing what those totals are, and that those represent only Fund 101, the General County Operating Fund. Then you'll see listed below that the revenue amounts for all revenues included in each of those individual funds. And when you put all of those funds together, Fund 101 through 107, that gives you the total amount for the County General Fund, or the roll-up category that we have by state statute. And then the table below that is all of those individual funds put together in one table to list all of the revenues by category or by source, with all of those individual sub-funds together. So that's the compilation of the summation of all of those individual sub-funds together in what makes up the county general fund total. And you'll see that the sum total of the table at the top equals the sum total at the table at the bottom, and it's the exact same information. It's just portrayed in two different views. The top is viewed by fund, by sub-fund, and the bottom one is viewed by revenue category or revenue type. And those numbers do correspond there. This slide, now we were in talking about FY21, and now we're moved on. We're going to talk about briefly about FY22, because you might recognize this slide from the recommended budget presentation from a month or so ago. And this depicts the process that's outlined in General Statute 159-11, which is the North Carolina Local Government Budget Fiscal Control Act. And that clearly details the process that we go through to calculate the revenue neutral tax rate for the county in years of revaluation. And you'll see in point number 1 there in the text box, the first step in doing that is to determine a rate that would produce revenues equal to those produced for the current fiscal year. And if I can direct you to the table above that, you'll see a number that's $204.8 million. And that number was an intermediate step in the process to calculate the revenue neutral rate for FY22. That was not the final number for FY22. That was one intermediate step to build from FY21 to build towards the revenue neutral rate and then the ultimate tax rate for FY22. And that number, $204.8 million, is not an actual number that's in the budget. That's a working number that we use to get to the final number that we have in the actual budget. This view, we're going to put both pieces together, and we're going to see the tax rate on this table at the top. We're going to go through FY20, FY2021, and FY2022, and you'll see at the top of the table there the county-wide tax rate. In FY20 was 73.09. We all remember that. In FY21, it remained the same at 73.09. And then, of course, in FY22, through the revaluation, the adopted tax rate is 58.8 cents. I wanted to show you this so you could see, again, each of the individual sub-funds that when you put them together, or you stack them on top of each other as a package, they equal the overall county general fund, which is what correlates to the overall county tax rate. In FY21, you'll see the highlighted number at the top there, $59,581,000. That's this represents only the ad valorem revenue received in each of those individual funds. So the first slide we looked at showed all of the revenue sources, including ad valorem revenue, but also adding on sales tax, federal revenue, state revenue, local revenue in one slide. This slide shows only the revenue derived from the county-wide property tax rate by individual sub-fund. And you'll see if you go down to the bottom of that table, you'll see the number 206.3 million. That's the total of the ad valorem revenue for FY21. And if you go over one space, you'll see the total of 213 million. That's the growth of the countywide general fund of ad valorem property tax revenue between FY21 and FY22. So the change between ad valorem revenue from 21 to 22 is from 206.3 million to 213.1 million, which is an increase of 6.8 million or 3.32%. Now, another thing you'll see on this slide, in FY22, we wanted to simplify our budget structure. We've been operating for, I think, 6 or 7 years with a bifurcated tax rate or a bifurcated fund structure. And that means that we have, to make up our county general fund, we have 7 individual funds as part of that. So it's sliced 7 different ways. And in order to simplify that structure to make it easier for the county, we took Funds 103, which was the countywide fire fund, Funds 104, which was the EMS fund, and Fund 105, which was the school fund, and merged those into Fund 101, which is the general government fund. Now, all of those are subcomponents of the county general fund, or the umbrella fund, which includes all of those. And so in FY22, that's why you see that gray box there, because those 3 funds no longer exist independently. They've been rolled into Fund 101, the general government fund. And then another related change was we had around $25 million in debt service in the general fund, Fund 101, and we took that and moved it into our separate debt service fund, which is Fund 106. And so you'll notice a significant change between those 2 funds as well in between FY21 and FY22. But the numbers to compare to see what the growth was in the ad valorem tax revenue, which is the revenue that we get off of the county tax rate, is 206.3 million compared to 213 million in FY22. And again, that's a growth of $6.8 million. Now we're going to shift quickly to talk about local option sales tax during FY21. If you remember, and I know I've shared many times from the podium with you the story of our sales tax for FY21. During budget preparation for FY21, we were in the very early stages of the pandemic, and in order to put ourselves in a position of strength, we made very conservative estimates for sales tax in FY21. That was in line with the direction from the State Department of Fiscal Research, also with the North Carolina League of Municipalities, also what all other counties were doing just to not overextend ourselves with that revenue. And that's, going back to the Great Recession of 2009, 10, and 11, when I was in Mecklenburg County at that time in the budget office, and our biggest hit was that sales tax fell off a cliff during the recession because people stopped spending money. And in order to balance the budget during that time, Mecklenburg County had to lay off nearly 500 people to do that. I know that Union County was hit proportionally. I believe that we laid off quite a number of people that time too. So with those bad memories in the rearview mirror, in order to avoid a similar situation going into the unknown of the pandemic, we reduced the sales tax budget for 21 by a negative 4.5%, hoping it might be better, but just in case, being conservative on that. As we progressed through the year, I noticed that our collections were above the budgeted amount, and I do a projection each month based on what comes in, projecting forward, and with every month, the projected number was higher and higher and higher. And so when we spoke, I would share that with the board and let you know that was something on the horizon we would think about. As coming into May, now keep in mind too that there's a 3-month lag between when a dollar is spent in the local economy and when it comes back to the county as an actual revenue. And so we didn't get our first notification of what our collections would be for the fiscal year FY21 until October. And so the first presentation I did discussing sales tax was in December, and we had I believe 3 months of actual data to compare to. And at that time, it was obvious that we were, unless something significant happened later on in the year as the pandemic progressed, we were most likely our collections were going to exceed our budget for sales tax. In May, the county manager brought to you 4 proposed budget amendments to revise the budget up for sales tax by $5.4 million based on my best estimation or projections that I completed, indicating that we would collect about at least $5.4 million more than the budget in sales tax. And so those were put forward and were adopted by the board by board action. Those were Budget Amendment 49, 50, 51, and 52. Amendment 49 made $2.5 million available for Union County Public Schools to be dispersed for, I believe, around $800 bonuses for each employee for their great work they did to keep the schools open during the pandemic period. Another $2.5 million was made available to fund other post-employment benefits, or OPEB, in the county budget, which is an obligation that we have that we did not fund as part of the adopted budget, as in an effort to reduce the expense in FY21 to maintain the flat tax rate of 73.09. Also, Amendment 51 and 52 were related to the Sheriff's Office. Amendment 51 was made $315,000 available to the Sheriff's Office for one-time tools and supplies items, and those actually were items that the Sheriff had requested as part of the FY22 budget process, but because they were one-time in nature and it was clear that we were going to have additional revenue, those were moved from the FY22 budget request process into the FY21 to take advantage of current year available budget to reduce the burden on the FY22 tax rate and 22 budget. The same with Budget Amendment 52, which made funds available for the sheriff to purchase ammunition, which he noted as a great need for the office at that time. So the board took great action to make these funds available for the county and the community. And I believe that's all that I have. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
I have
Williams.
some questions I'd like to ask.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Blake. I appreciate the presentation, and I think it's very important to be transparent. Our citizens have an expectation of transparency, and to the extent we are transparent, we inspire confidence. So, thank you. I'd like to start by connecting some of the figures that you highlighted in this presentation with three of the figures that looks like here are, that Commissioner Rushing had in his written post that he posted on the weekend. And I'll just start by reading that written post, and then we can connect some of the figures here. The post reads, the $169,300,000 budgeted turned into $204,810,884. On my calculator, that is a $35,510,884 difference in 2021 projected incomes. Why? If UCPS, if Union County Public Schools, only needed a penny, $3.6 million in an increase, why did they get all this? And then there's an image here that looks like a composite of three different tables that I think you'd provided in prior presentations from different periods of time. The top table looks like, in his post, looks analogous to what you have on actually page 1, I believe. And if we can maybe start there, that would be great. But let's first, and let's also, well, we'll start here on page 1. The $169,300,000 that the Commissioner references. On page 1, under adopted fiscal year 2021, that figure is represented here, is it not?
It sure is.
Okay, and I think it's specifically $169,258,060. The other figure that the Commissioner references, $204,810,884. If we can go to, thank you, to the next page, page 3, that figure is represented in the ad valorem calculation for fiscal year 2022. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this figure, the $204,810,000, this is a fiscal year 2021 figure that is used as part of the calculation for figuring fiscal year 2022 revenue neutral. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And Commissioner Rushing's correct. The difference between these two numbers, $169.3 million and $204.8 million, is indeed $35.5 million, which is a big number. The question I would have for you, Blake, is the $169.3 million figure and the $204.8 million figure, are these even the same types of figures?
They're related, certainly, but they're not comparable.
Okay, so they're not the same types of figures, they're not comparable. Can you just describe for me what the $169.3 million figure is, and then what the $204.8 million figure is?
Sure. The $169 million, again, is only looking at one sub-fund of the larger general county fund. So it's the sub-fund that contains all of the county departmental operations, revenue and expense, and it's the total of all the revenue included in that fund. And so it wouldn't compare to take one slice of the larger fund and compare it to the entire all slices of that larger fund.
Okay, so for the $169.3 million figure, the general government fund, that general government fund is actually comprised, I think as we can see here, of multiple revenue streams, right? So it includes, right at the top here, ad valorem taxes and fees, which, by the way, I think it should be interesting to everybody. That figure is $59.5 million. That's a far cry from $204.8 million. But in any event, just to make sure I understand this right, general government fund comprised of multiple revenue streams, ad valorem taxes, about $59.5 million, local option sales tax, revised to ultimately, at least from our last good figures, $52 million and change, intergovernmental transfers, federal, state, investment revenue. I mean, we can go on, but the point is, The general government fund is comprised of multiple revenue streams, of which ad valorem is one. Now, the ad valorem portion of the general government fund, it's actually a fraction, a small fraction of overall ad valorem revenues, correct?
That's right.
Okay, we can see here, just 59 out of 204, that's, just back of the envelope, kind of off the top of my head, that's, about a quarter roughly of ad valorem revenues. So the single largest revenue stream out of ad valorem is what? Is it education funding for fiscal year 2021?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and the education, the UCPS funding, that's not part of the general government fund, is it, in fiscal year 2021?
In 21, it's not.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good. So we can see that these two numbers are vastly different. So it doesn't really make sense to say that there's $35.5 million of money lying around that we could have used to meet the county's needs, but instead we just really wanted to raise taxes an extra cent. That wouldn't be accurate to say that $35.5 million is available, because these two figures aren't even comparable.
Yeah, they're not comparable, so that's
Okay,
not a true
so
statement.
not even $25.5 million,
No.
not even $10.5 million. Okay, so it might even, just to use like a household analogy, if, if a husband and a wife have household income, earned income, that might be analogous to ad valorem revenue, the big figure. And if you budget funds for a mortgage and for, groceries and maybe utilities, that would be a sub-fund. But there are other sub-funds in your household budget, that you might also track on a spreadsheet. But to compare what you spend on room and board with what the husband and wife bring into the home in terms of income, it's apples and watermelons as a comparison. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so moving on, let's talk about this. You had talked some about the local option sales tax, and I think everybody can acknowledge here the results from that. The figures that we got continue to improve in terms of what we received in sales tax through the balance of the fiscal year. Is that fair to say?
That's true.
Okay. And we had, at least a couple updates from you as you got information on how those figures were coming in better and better. So the board got the updated information on better and better revenues, did it not?
Yeah, I went back and looked, and I had the opportunity to present between December and June on 7 occasions, and on 6 of those occasions, we discussed the sales tax projections.
Okay. And, the figures were what? Was it about $7 million? How much extra in sales tax revenue at this point? I know we're still awaiting information from probably in the fall we may get the final information in terms of what sales tax for the last fiscal year looks like. But as it stands today, about how much extra in sales tax does it look like we're going to get?
So we, in May, we amended the budget up by $5.5 million. And,
Right.
and based on what we have now, and there's still 2 months left of data that's outstanding. If trends continue, I would expect we would overcollect the existing budget by $1.5 to $2 million, depending on how it comes out. But we're still headed on an upward trajectory as far as sales tax.
Okay. In these slides, let's see, where do we find the figures on the local sales tax option in terms of the additional funds through March 31st that are coming in? Let's see here. Well, we definitely see it on page 1, the differences between the original adopted figures and the year-end projections. As those funds came into the county, did they just kind of accumulate in a corner, or did staff and the Board of County Commissioners decide ultimately to use those funds in that fiscal year, in the fiscal year 2021?
Yeah, the action was taken with these budget amendments I mentioned, 49 through 52, to
And that's the last slide, right?
it is, yeah.
Okay.
To recognize and appropriate those funds for purpose.
So for fiscal year 2021, $2.5 million for the public school stipend, the COVID stipend, basically $2.5 million for post-employee benefits. Just as an aside, I think that's pretty important. Well, I'll have a question I'll get to later, but bottom line, about $5.5 million. That was a supplemental expenditure for fiscal year 2021 that this board passed. And I'd just like to note that Commissioner Rushing and Commissioner Williams both voted for that. All right. Let's talk some about the conservative nature of the estimations that we made, because I think it is kind of surprising, pleasantly surprising, I would say, that the sales tax funds came in just better and better and better. Can you talk some about the justification, the reasons why, we were that conservative? I know you did some in your presentation, but maybe elaborate a little bit more on, the philosophy behind a conservative estimation of sales tax revenue.
Sure. Well, sales tax is historically one of the most elastic revenue sources that you have, or the one that's not quite as stable as the property tax. In times of poor economic situations, the sales tax often drops, just like it did in the Great Recession of 2009, 10, 11. And so knowing that and having been through that here in Union County and all around the country, it was a big risk, or a question mark of that's where the biggest risk was for sales tax going into COVID. And again, the time period I think is important too, because this was happening in really April of last year during the budget process, and the COVID pandemic began in March, and so we were in the second and third months of this. We, as budget directors from all the counties and cities across the state, we communicate with each other, as well as with the School of Government and with the state. We were in constant conversation of, how are you going to react to this? What are you guys going to do? What are you seeing in Gaston County, Mecklenburg County, Buncombe County? And the general consensus was it's better to be conservative in situations like that, to be pleasantly surprised, and to be in a position of strength instead of overextending yourself and then maybe having to, like what we did in Mecklenburg County during the Great Recession, was we did not pull back our sales tax revenues far enough, and we had to make mid-year reductions to the budget, which included letting people go, laying people off, and including and reducing big chunks of the operating budget during the year to balance that budget with decreasing sales tax during the year. So to hopefully avoid that, we went ahead and reduced sales tax by negative 4.5%, which seemed to be consistent from what we were hearing and from the guidance we were getting.
Because indeed, as you kind of suggest, I mean, in past periods of economic downturn or distress, people will often kind of hunker down, reduce the consumer discretionary kind of expenditures. I think a lot of us were surprised that people were home and we got stimmy checks and click, click, click on Amazon, and, it ended up, we ended up being pleasantly surprised. But the bottom line is you've demonstrated, as these funds came in, we learned about them and we utilized them in that very same fiscal year. The other thing I'd be kind of curious to know more about, Blake, is as we were at the end of fiscal year 2020 and we had the COVID pandemic that had been announced, and we were just trying to navigate through this as best we can, looking at fiscal year 2021, it seems like to me there was some belt tightening, that county staff, that management looked at in terms of hiring freezes and cuts to education and travel. And the OPED, there was, I think, some transfers from the post-employee benefit account into the general fund, and also some delays, or I think we actually skipped a contribution to our post-employee benefit obligations in that year. Is that summary essentially correct?
It is, yeah. And one thing that we did and this was before COVID, this was really a decision made in October, November, was that the county manager directed the departments to reduce their operating budgets by 5%, just as a matter of pulling back regardless of, economic conditions or COVID, because we didn't know COVID was happening at that time. So that was really the first step of the budget process, was to try and streamline operations, was to reduce 5% from operating budgets anyway. And then once we got into the COVID period, the manager was very proactive in taking opportunity to implement the actions that you mentioned.
So, in other words, in the early part of 2020, staring at fiscal year 2021, county staff had already identified some measures to tighten belts, essentially.
Yeah, and the 5% reduction was about $1 million in savings, well ahead of COVID.
Okay, thank you. And if I'm not mistaken, the supplemental fiscal year 2021 that this board passed in May, that went to rectify some of what we'd done with OPEB, the post-employee benefits account, early in fiscal year 2021, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right, let's see. Just a little bit more here. I think we've made the point that as these extra funds piled up, they didn't just sit around unused. We used them, we utilized them to meet county needs, and most of this board, or in some cases all, depending on the vote, ended up supporting those actions. All right, I want to thank you, Blake, for answering my questions so thoroughly, and I'd like to just kind of summarize, if I might, what I hope we've gleaned from this. First and foremost, which I think is most important, there isn't $35.5 million that's just lying around somewhere in some secret pot, or that we could have utilized, that we could have employed to meet county needs, but instead we wanted to raise people's taxes by 1 penny. I think it's pretty clear that is something that definitely didn't happen. As has been shared, the $35.5 million is a difference between two figures that aren't even the same figures. I think the other point that's really important here is that estimates for fiscal year 2020 revenues were conservative. They sure were. And we had, I think, significant justification for those conservative revenues. COVID was a difficult thing to navigate through, and I think some conservative philosophy in our approach is warranted. That's what I'm hearing. But in any event, as revenues came in better than expected, we considered them and used them. The last thing I'd like to mention is, why are we spending all this time and delaying trips, delaying vacations? I'm sorry, by the way, for any staff or other commissioners whose trips or vacations have been delayed. But I think it's important to cover this stuff here in fiscal year 2022, looking back at fiscal year 2021. And I'll tell you why. Because when this kind of information gets put out there, it's complicated. I mean, it's complicated to me, and I've got a background in reading financial statements. And when it gets put out there and it's wrong, conclusions get drawn that, frankly, I'm not comfortable with. And to that end, I'm just going to read one single comment, and it's unattributed. I'm not saying who it is, but I'm just going to read one single comment that was made on this thread that I think it behooves us just to kind of reflect on, because words matter. This is the comment. How about we use the money to investigate, to find out where all of our tax dollars are going and how much is going back into their pockets. My questions are concluded. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other questions? Commissioner Rushing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It might be a while, Blake.
Okay.
Did we raise taxes or pass a tax increase for last year,
In FY22,
21?
not for FY21, it was, the tax rate was, remained the same at 73.09.
The tax rate remained the same, even though we were facing COVID and dire predictions, we didn't increase taxes, right?
Yep.
Did we, were we able to meet that OPEB funding that we were going to, the 2.5 million?
We did through the budget amendment.
So we did, we met that. Union County Public Schools salary supplements, 2.5 million. Now, one of the school board members said that there was something about a matching contribution from the schools, that they also did something with 2.5 million. Do you know anything about that?
I'm not directly familiar with any
So,
action.
so we didn't say you guys need to match it, which would have made it a $5 million total. How many public school employees are there?
I can't say for
Does
sure.
anybody know the answer to that? If you could get that for me, it should be easy to find, I would think. And then multiply that by 800, and that should give us the number that I'm looking for. The sheriff's office tools and supplies, 315. Sheriff's office ammunition, which ammunition because of COVID was difficult to get. Can any of these funds, like the UCPS salary supplements, because it's one-time money, it's not an ongoing source, can any of that be reimbursed by the COVID CARES Act funding?
I don't know the details of that. I don't believe
Well,
that's.
we've been told in the past that bonuses and supplements, even retroactive, can be funded through the CARES Act funding. So maybe that we can get that. If the schools put in 2.5 million as well, maybe that's $5 million there. We increased the school's budget with $5 million this year. Last year, they didn't go up very much unless we tack on the 2.5 million, they went up some. The information that's on this slide, this meeting all happened because of a question that I asked the county manager on Saturday, was COVID money being used to offset or increase the budget anyhow? I didn't get an answer, which I thought was odd because yes, no, simple, yes or no. But I didn't get an answer, and he had to have a staff meeting Monday to figure it all out. And I said, well, I'm trying to figure out why he just didn't answer the question. So I asked some more questions on Sunday. And the answer to those questions are on these papers that were emailed to me, and I'm assuming the other commissioners, they were emailed to you as well. But I don't see them as part of this presentation, and I don't see them on the board up here for us to look at. This is the reason for the emergency meeting that we had to have. Now, I was called at approximately 2 o'clock. I think I looked at my phone, it was about 2:03 on Monday, and was told by the chairman of the board that the board had directed the manager to delay giving me any information until tonight. So I needed to come back for an emergency meeting. So I came back. The manager, I called him, and he confirmed what the chairman said, that the board directed him to not give me any of that information until tonight. And still, it's not on this presentation. None of what I asked for is in this presentation that you just gave. So I'm assuming maybe somebody got a heads up. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. That means that Union County Board of Commissioners, to give direction to the county manager, had to have a meeting and had to call for action. We didn't have any debate. We didn't have any discussion. I didn't hear a motion. No vote. So, Mr. Manager, can you please tell me, the commissioners, that directed you to not give me this information until tonight?
Mr. Rushing, I think you've already stated what took place.
Right, but can you name the names? Because I spoke to Commissioner Simpson, and he said he didn't give that direction. So, considering Commissioner Williams.
The board leadership gave me that direction.
So, but you said the board. You didn't say the leadership of the board. You said the board gave you direction, which means 3 county commissioners have to give you permission to direct somebody to do something. So that, if Commissioner Simpson didn't do it, then that only leaves 3 commissioners that did it. So, hypothetically, you guys had an illegal meeting.
No,
Theoretically,
let me answer that
there was
for
no
you.
illegal
the manager
meeting.
lied to me about what was done.
No,
what
sir.
action was
No,
taken.
sir, and I take exception to that.
I'm
There
glad
was
you
no
take exception.
illegal
I took
meeting.
exception when you called me and said that the Board of Commissioners directed me to not give you this information until Thursday night. And it was a simple question. We didn't even need a special meeting. You could have sent this out to all of us, and it would explain. Now, I'll finish my thought, then you can get on me all you want. So the bifurcated budget process, that was implemented by board action in 2014. Worked wonders because the school system in the county had been embroiled in legal issues. And when that happened, when somebody got their car tax bill, it said you spend, out of $100, you spend 60-something dollars for schools, you spend, this much for county, this much for whatever. So people saw that and said, wow, the schools are getting a high share of the tax burden. And I know that some school board members don't like that. They would have liked to see that go away because it's harder to stir people up politically when they see that bill. So I got that. But can you tell me when board action was taken, when there was a discussion, when there was a motion, and when there was a vote to tell you to go away from that process?
As part of the budget process, when the budget is adopted, this current structure of the budget at that time is when that's adopted is when it is approved by the board to do that.
Right, but
And
did you provide us with the previous year's way of doing the budget?
It was
The apples to apples?
in the budget presentation for the proposed budget, there was a slide or two that discussed that transfer that would happen. That structure.
I've never seen the amount that would be contributed to the fire departments. I've never seen the amount that would be contributed to public schools. It was 44.5 cents. I don't know what it is now, so I'm left to speculate and try to figure it out myself. It's kind of hard to do, especially when you're kind of trying to fish through all these numbers. And I can only read with one eye, so I get a headache. So, did you provide us with the previous year's way of doing budgeting so we could compare apples to apples?
Not as part of the budget process, but
Right,
I'm
not as
certainly
part of the
happy to
budget
do that for you.
process. And did we have discussion, okay, we had a board action to do the budget a certain way, and there's a reason for it, because again, it gave the people an idea, a transparency into how the budget was done and how much of their money goes into Union County Public Schools. And people, for the most part, were satisfied. They were satisfied with it. So now, in the future, nobody will have that. We'll have a pamphlet, I think, that we'll put in something that somebody will throw in the trash first time to get it. And but as far as seeing it on your bills, they won't know what 44 cents, 33 cents, 32 cents, how much is going to Union County Public Schools. Is it going down or going up? They won't know, and they can't keep track of that. Now, from what I see, is I see that those numbers are kind of trending down. Now, I could be wrong, but that's kind of one of the questions I asked, to try to see if the school money is trending down. Then, and we said that we passed the money for schools, the 1 cent tax increase for schools. Then, if we get a bigger piece of the pie, because not only does that come along with it, but if we're off by our projections, let's say $100,000 per penny. If we're off, and we have been, will that be fair to say we've been off by 100,000 or more per penny for a few times?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So every penny that the schools get, so if it's 44 pennies, that increase to their budget could have been $4.45 million that year, just on top of everything, just from what we didn't think we would get and what we got. We used to call it something like true-up, so I'm not an accountant, I don't know if true-up's even a thing. That's just what we called it. But now we're not going to have true-up anymore. So that $4.45 million now might be, now the penny's going to be 3.6 million. If it's 3.7 or 3.8 or 3.9 next year, that penny's lost to them. They don't get those pennies. They don't get that number that they have set kind of attributed back to, hey, that's our money you didn't give us last year.
It under the current structure, it would fall into the general governmental fund.
Right.
And then it would be up to the board to take action.
Right, it'd be up to
disperse
us to
that.
tell them if they could have it or not.
Sure.
It wouldn't be like the gentleman's agreement kind of that we had to keep from going to court and getting $91 million lawsuits. It's kind of an agreement that said, hey, look, I was there, talking to them about this and working through this and fighting for it too. I wasn't on the board when it passed, but it passed. And I thought it was the best idea that we could have done. And then we split out fire departments. And, many people didn't know that we had a countywide fire tax. They thought that wasn't such a thing. So they would get their town tax bill for fire, and then they would get their countywide fire tax bill. Oh, the firemen, they were hot. They didn't like to explain that to anybody, that yes, the county does give some of your money, or some of the money from the county funds to fire departments. Fine. So politically, they didn't like that optic. School board members didn't politically like the optic that you knew what you were paying of your car bill to the Union County Public Schools. I don't know when these things were discussed. I don't know when they were changed. But it appears now, the way things are going, that we don't have to have discussion in open meetings. It's just decided, and we get to just see it. And when a commissioner's sitting here trying to ask questions, which I think that night you asked me, do you have any questions? Several others probably said, do you have any questions? And I did. I had some questions. But I was told to wait till the end of the meeting. At the end of the meeting, Chairman Helms made a motion to adjourn. I challenged him on that. He gave me a chance. I asked about 3 or 4 questions. And then Chairman Helms said, if I wanted to talk, I need to talk to the county manager. He was sitting over there. I need to talk to the county manager. The chairman manager, yeah, I'll talk to you one-on-one. We'll be glad to discuss this with you. Didn't want to talk one-on-one. Didn't want to have a private meeting with it. That's not transparency. So if I was wrong, that could have been pointed to me out then. So now I'm trying to figure out why nobody wants me asking questions. Why, if COVID money, if we got $23 million of COVID money that we approved prior to the budget vote, right? We approved accepting $23.295 million, something like that, in COVID funding prior to the adoption of the budget. If that money can be used to replace the money that we spent on teacher bonuses and other things, then that would about be, well, that would, if the schools matched, then that's enough money not only to stop your tax increase, that's enough money to give a tax cut. So that was my question that started all this. And through that, I found out that the county commissioners had some kind of direction vote, or at least 3 did, and the manager confirmed it, that he was given board direction. The chairman informed me that board direction was given to delay giving information to a county commissioner. And I will tell you, this information that I asked for is not in your presentation. On Monday afternoon, after some attorneys had been spoken to, I did have a meeting with the county manager and some staff. And they helped me understand things. And I tried to explain to them what I was looking for. And I think you were on the meeting.
Sure.
I think we had a great conversation.
Yeah, certainly.
However, again, I was violently ill for the last 3 days. Not been feeling good. I finally got this morning when I asked Lynn to resend it. I got it, I think I may have gotten it yesterday sometime from the manager. But this is simple information that I asked for. What's the percentage of Union County Public School funding next year compared to this year? Is it going up or is it going down? And the manager made a comment that kind of concerned me that day. He said, well, it's going to look bad. I don't know what number he was talking about it's going to look bad. He said, something's going to look bad. I don't care how it looks. I just want to know. And the assistant county manager made a comment that, well, the school's number, that's just an arbitrary number. Well, no, it's not. We tell people that if we're going to charge 44.5 cents of your car tax, it's going to go to Union County Public Schools. If we're not doing that, if we're shifting money around from sales tax and other things to go in there, that's not transparent, and that's not what was going on. And we may be giving them every bit of it, but if we're taking something that we would have given them anyways away from them, again, I don't see the transparency in that. So I think I asked, what would the rate be if we had a school rate this year? What would their rate be? And I'm having trouble. You can tell me where it's at, but I'm having trouble on these pages finding where that number's at.
Given that the process changed this year, I didn't calculate that number separately as an individual
But
rate.
I'd
since
ask
the
you,
fund was
I had
separate.
asked you to, so I could see apples to apples instead of apples to watermelons. I asked you if I could see that, and for some reason, I still don't seem to have that. I may be missing it, but I'm asking you now, where am I missing it on these pages that everybody else doesn't have, but I've got?
It's, I apologize if that was my direction to bring that. I would have certainly brought it, but I must have missed that during the meeting. I'll be happy to
Thank you.
try and put that
If you
together.
can make that available to me soon,
Sure.
I would appreciate that. So my contention all along is, we should use COVID money, this $23 million windfall. We could use it for water countywide, but if it meant cutting everybody's taxes, which everybody benefits from, businesses, everybody, every homeowner, every business owner benefits from a lower tax rate. Even keeping it the same, everybody would benefit from that. But instead, we raise taxes a penny, and if we're going to get it back from that COVID money anyways, that was my question. That was the original question that started all this. What is the COVID money, what kind of effect is it going to have on this budget? Now, this budget you and I talked about, it needs to be so simple that me, a farmer, Jerry, a farmer, an attorney, a property owner, a retired person, a truck driver, a nurse, that everybody can see what did we take in last year versus what did we say we were going to take in last year total. And then how much did we spend last year versus what we predicted to spend last year total. Not revisions and all that stuff, that's great, but from year to year, what are we doing? What are the decisions that we're making in the middle of the year, like this $5.4 million? What kind of decisions is that happening with, is that making us have a tax increase? And since it's one-time money, maybe not, but if we get it back this year in this budget, will it be attributed to last year's budget, or was it accounted for in the 2022 budget? It's not been accounted in a budget from what I've been told. Is that correct?
The $23 million in CARES money?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if, that'll be placed in a special revenue fund. We call it a multi-year grant fund.
Right.
And so that'll be separate from the general funds that we discussed earlier, funds 101 through 107.
But if we refund ourselves for one-time supplemental payments, where does it go then? 101, right?
It would repay 101.
It goes into 101. What is 101?
It's the general governmental fund, county operations.
What we're talking about. So if we decided to try to figure out a way to put all that money in there, we'd have to figure out a way to do it, but we could, possibly. If we gave the employees all this year, 20-something million dollars in bonuses, we could give them a heck of a bonus and put it all back into general government, correct?
Is if that was in line with the direction from the federal government.
Right, if the board directed to do so. So there is a big, fat, juicy pot of money coming. It's just not accounted anything yet. And that was my question, that was my concern.
It's accounted for, it's just not appropriated for use yet. But
Is what?
it's accounted for, but it's not appropriated for use yet.
Right, it's in a special fund off to the side, right?
Yep.
That's correct, and make sure I'm saying that correct, because I think we heard that's not the case. There is a special fund off to the side with 23 million, not 35, 23.
The special
$1 million
revenue
in it.
multi-year grant fund.
And our tax increase this year generated, how much? Our 1 penny tax increase generated how much money?
3.6 million.
3.6 million. And we're spending one-time money for the schools. We're spending 5 million, maybe, if the schools are matching with their sales tax, with their ad valorem property tax numbers, if they're matching, which I've been told that's what they're doing. So if they match, we could technically replenish all that 5 million with the money, correct?
I'm not sure what the schools are doing on their side for.
Yeah, this was one of the school board members said that they had some kind of matching deal with our 2.5 million.
Oh.
So again, if we find that out, that would be good to know. The school board member could be wrong. I don't know. But the way I understand it, there was $5 million. That would have been 3.6 million and then some that we could not have had to raise taxes if we do the smart thing and use some of the COVID money to offset that increase. When did you say again we made the increase to the schools for that budget money?
These amendments were on May 10th.
So right toward the end of the budget process.
Yeah.
The fire departments, the EMS, all those services going into one fund. No longer do we tell people where the money's going, so no longer are we restricted on making sure the money goes there, correct?
We still communicate what that would be, and we still publish it, and it's by board decision how much goes where.
But if we told them if we told the fire departments that we were going to spend 1.5 pennies of countywide tax on fire service, would we be obligated to do that?
We wouldn't be held to that. It would be up to board decision, up to.
Have we ever decided not to do that?
I'm not sure.
Since you've been here, how long have you been here?
3.5 years.
Okay, so 3.5 years you've been here. Has Union County ever not given Union County Public Schools their 44.5 cents of the tax dollars?
Not that I'm aware of.
Is it possible?
Is it possible before FY '22?
Right.
Well, anything's possible because even under the bifurcated tax structure, if the board decided to change that tax rate for the schools to 42.5,
Right, but we haven't changed
you
it
could do that by
since,
board action.
I don't think we've changed it since you've been here. Last change I remember, and I argued this at the time, is it went from like 46 to 44, 46 something to 44 something. That money went into the 3.09 cent special bond, voter-approved bond tax, which will still be on the tax form, right?
It will.
It will.
Yep.
So what we did back then, I argued, was if you take a penny and a half away from Union County Public Schools and you bring it over to and that money goes into what? That goes into the general fund?
The debt service?
Yeah.
It goes to pay debt service, which before FY '22 was really only a portion of the overall total debt service we had. The historic debt service, I believe before 2014, was still in the general fund.
Right.
And so we've merged those now so you can get a clear picture of what dedicated tax rate is required to fund the full load of county debt service.
Okay, so that's a separate fund from the 101 fund?
It is. Now
Okay.
there's three
It
funds.
was included with it, but now it's not.
Well, it was split between.
Okay.
A portion was in the general fund, a portion was in the debt service.
So you mean a portion of that 3.09 cent total, or what is it now?
Well, the 3.09 was all dedicated towards recently approved debt,
Mhm.
and then there was it varied between about $50 and $35 million that was still in the general fund.
Mhm.
That was in the portion of the tax rate that only went to the general fund.
Mhm.
It was split that way, and now it'll all be into the debt service fund.
So, and again, my argument at the time was, okay, if we're taking away a penny and a half from the school's rate, they just lost $4-point-something million. If they don't get 44 cents and they lose money off that, then they lose that true-up, that $100,000 or more that we were seeing every year in under-projected revenues. So they lose that money off their account, which could mean a lot. That could be a significant amount to them. So, no, I appreciate this. I appreciate the meeting that we had on Monday that was almost delayed. I'm glad that y'all didn't have to delay it any further. I just wish that I didn't have to come home from my vacation sick as a dog, driving 3 hours to have an emergency meeting to not answer the questions that I asked. But I know why it was done, and I know why we had to have it. So I apologize again for my social media posts, fellow commissioners. I just looking for money that I can't justify. And I'm looking for reasons that I feel like we've given the schools less money instead of more money, but yet we're blaming them for a tax increase. So I'll keep looking. I'll keep digging. And you'll get me some of the answers that I need.
I'm very happy to answer any questions you may have.
But I would suggest to my fellow commissioners, if y'all want to continue to give board direction without having a meeting of the board, that everybody needs to speak to our attorneys and get some advice on that.
Well, Commissioner Rushing, I'll answer that question, because when I got the call, and I know it was over the weekend, when it was demanded of staff to provide this information for you, I'm the one that called you and said, like we normally do, when any commissioner asks for information, whether it's Commissioner Rafe Williams or yourself, we all get it. So I'm the one that made the decision and called and said, we'll provide you this information Thursday evening at the meeting. And you can cast stones at the manager, anybody you want, but I made that call. I don't mind standing up to it, because I learned a long time ago, one commissioner doesn't run this board. It's five people for having that purpose. There was a lot of information that was given out, and I was the blunt of a lot of the negative Facebook posts and everything, and I had to answer to people, why are we not going to spend the $23 million totally on water? Well, there's a lot of other entities that have needs within this county that, because of COVID, had to do without, and we can give them some relief. My understanding, one of the reasons we needed this meeting was because there was a lot of misleading, false, knowingly false information being put out, and unfortunately on Facebook, everybody takes it as a gospel. And so I'm the one that also said at the beginning of that meeting, not you're going to get to answer questions at the end, that this was an information meeting, because we have the most transparency that we've ever had with this staff. They answer our questions, and so it's all commissioners get the same opportunity. There was a lot of information. I hadn't seen this number. Like Blake said, it was presented to us a minimum of 7 times. If you're not paying attention, I can't help that. But there was a lot of discussion, not just the 7 meetings that where he presented to the board, is when we have our communication meetings to make sure we understand what's being presented to us. It's very effective. So I'll take the lumps for that. You know, what I'd ask you to do is not distort the information you're putting out there for political gains. Commissioner Ray.
Stoney, you always leave out the important details. It sounds like you're being a champion tonight for the school board. But I was on the school board when the bonds passed that built Sun Valley. And it was your idea to make the schools pay for the 1.9% debt service. It used to be more than 44.5, and that was your idea to take it down 1.9 cents. Yes, it was. And as far as the bonuses, the people in Union County, well, I'll go back and you can ask your school board members, and it happened. As far as schools this year, teachers had to teach online kids, they had to teach in-class kids. They worked 6 days a week, 14 hours a day. And when we talked about giving them this bonus, you said, why do they deserve a bonus? They got a paycheck. Did you not?
I don't remember that. I could have said that.
Well, I believe something's
We must have been
following.
one of our special meetings.
Well, you said it.
Must have been one of our top secret meetings that we have. We
Uh,
don't call the public to.
But we've all acknowledged that our schools are our greatest resource. And anybody that's on the school board knows that keeping quality teachers in Union County is tantamount. Now, there are no secret meetings. You keep saying that. It's like throwing something against the wall. Finally, something's going to stick. There are no secret meetings.
And why was I told there was?
What?
Why was I told by the chairman and the manager that there was?
I never told you there was a secret meeting. I
said
told
that
you
the Board
I
of
gave it to
Commissioners-
you.
No, you didn't.
No,
You
I-
said the Board of Commissioners gave direction, and the manager confirmed exactly what you said. It's specific language with a specific meaning. And you just said that one commissioner doesn't run this board. One commissioner doesn't make all decisions, speak for the boards. But yet you spoke for the board when you told me that my fellow commissioners, and I think that's the way you put it, had decided that they didn't want me to get the information until tonight. And I still don't have the information that I asked for in this presentation. It's not here.
Yeah, well, I received the information as you did in an email. What the public needs to know, you demanded 6 years of information.
Right.
Our CFO had left on vacation. Is that not right?
I don't know who's on vacation. I don't keep up to that. I know I'd left on vacation. And all I asked was a simple question. Any COVID money is being used to offset the budget? And I didn't get a yes or no answer. I got nothing for days.
We hadn't spent.
Still haven't got the answer to that.
We all got that answer tonight. No, it hadn't. It's
Okay.
been received, but it hadn't been allocated. Is that a fair statement?
But it can be allocated.
That's not the question. It
That is the
hasn't been
question.
used? No.
That is the question. Any time from now to the end of the year, that money can be allocated for exactly the purposes
That's
I
true,
said.
and this board will make that decision.
That's right, and when you do, you've raised an ongoing tax, a penny tax, that's gonna happen year after year after year on the refund of a one-time expenditure. And so the 1 penny doesn't go away. The bonuses go away. They went away, they're done. Now, if we were so interested in giving the teachers more money, why don't we give them a salary increase?
We gave them a supplement increase.
Is it a bonus increase or
It's
is it
an
a?
ongoing expense.
No, it's not if it's a one-time supplement increase.
There
It's
were
a-
salary increases that were approved in the budget.
But was it one time?
No, sir, they were salary increases.
Because the way the school board member told me that it was one time.
Well, maybe you need to
They're-
read the
they're
budget
supple-
yourself.
They're ongoing supplements, and there were salary increases.
Okay, why are we calling it supplement increases and salary increases?
The state pays the salary, and individual school districts are allowed to pay supplements if they so choose to maybe try to keep their teacher pool intact.
So,
So there are supplements that this board has funded since the mid-1990s to teacher salaries. You have a base salary, and then you have county supplements for all the professional staff.
well, here
And
tonight,
this board has funded teacher supplements, professional supplements since the mid-1990s. And there were teacher supplements that were included in the funding of this year's budget, along with increases to salaries, mainly of support staff.
And our senior management team, me and Richard weren't there at those meetings. Our senior management team, working with UCPS's senior management team, and I believe the chair and the vice chair, that supplement doesn't start till January 1, isn't that right?
That's correct.
To give us a half year to get ready for it. But if you're worried about helping the schools, you took the debt payment on the Sun Valley Western Union bond payment away from us, because if, I've been reminded many times, I voted against the school board budget that year because I said it was unfair that the people approved the bond and we had to pay for it.
you can call Leslie Boyd and ask her. She was a school board liaison at the time when I told her that, Leslie, do not let them take this money. Do not let them take this money. It takes away your true up. Do not let them take this money. I had arguments with the CFO at the time and Commissioner Akmus. Had a long discussion with them as why it takes money away from them. And no, if I voted for the final budget, then I voted for the least thing I could. But as far as did I support that, I absolutely did not support them taking it away.
Stoney, all I can say is people can explain stuff to you, but they can't understand it for you.
Yeah, well, I understand that y'all, the manager and the chairman said that you guys took an illegal action of the board and gave board direction, not chairman direction, board direction to feed me nothing until this meeting. And I still, and if I wouldn't have argued with the attorneys, I still wouldn't have that information, and I still wouldn't have it tonight because it is not included in this presentation. Now, if y'all think that makes us look bad, so be it. That's called transparency. But that's the question. If it makes us look bad, fine. But we look how we are. If we look bad, fine. If we look good, fine. But I'd rather look good with y'all as a group than get caught later on in a courtroom trying to explain how we reimbursed ourselves $5 million while blaming a tax increase on the school system. My opinion.
Well, I'll just say, and you keep repeating this fabricated accusation that you made. I personally told you that I said that as a chairman. I felt like as a chairman, I had that authority. If I was wrong, I was wrong. But to fabricate it and say it that we had an illegal session is part of the disguise, the deception that you are such a master as, and you continue it. And you had the gall to stand here and say it in front of us when weren't there. It didn't happen. There was no illegal. I have never participated to my knowledge, in any illegal meeting, we have meetings where two commissioners get with staff to have an education system to understand what we're doing. There's a lot of information thrown to this board at a meeting. And if we're smart, we will understand what's going to be presented, have a better understanding so we can ask intelligent questions. Every single board member has an opportunity to participate in that communication, and we do not have the same people over and over. It's a great tool, and I can tell you with 40 years in management, if you don't communicate with your staff as a manager, you're heading down the garden path. So it's a good tool. It is and I can tell you that our attorneys make sure that we follow the rule. So I'd appreciate if you'd quit fabricating this story that you had, that the board had a secret meeting and
Mr.
gave
Chairman,
you direction. I said, I know
answered the
what I
question.
said. You can make up
No,
whatever
you answered,
want.
you answered the question when you took the blame on yourself. So again, if two other commissioners didn't vote with you, on 2/02 Monday, I sent Mark a message and said, I'm going to need the information I asked for today. I'm not coming back to town for a special meeting, and it's not a hard request for something like that that should take 4 days for simple questions, and it didn't take 4 days. And I can tell you that if you'd like to speak to the attorneys about what was said to them, we can do that in closed session, and the attorneys can tell you what they were spoken with by the county manager and by myself on Monday. So if y'all would like to go back there and discuss that. So we got a problem. You and the manager confirmed it, said it was the board directed, the board, not a board member, not the chairman of the board directed the manager. Mark asked me not to put him between a rock and a hard place. And so I took that he had 3 commissioners that were telling him what to do. And we
You're
didn't have.
assuming.
No, I was told by the chairman and the county manager that that's what happened. He was given direction by the Union County Board to do this. So when he says the board gave me direction to not provide you with this information, then I have to assume he's telling me the truth. That's my assumption. Now, if he said something that was false, and if the chairman said something that was false, and they want to take the blame for that, then I'm fine to accept that. But, I know what I was told, Mr. Chairman, and I know what I related to our attorney, and I know that I got my information, some of what I wanted that day. I just didn't get all of what I wanted until a couple of days later.
And another thing, I will admit, I lean on Commissioner Williams. I started off not liking him, and he has proven to be a huge resource when it comes to financials and legal things. And I said, he called me and he said, Dennis, I was 99% sure that Blake was right. My stomach dropped because I thought he was going to say something to the opposite. But he said, I'm 100% sure now. And when you can't accept people that are your peers telling you there is nothing here, why will you not accept it?
Dennis, Blake just told you there's a $23 million special fund out there that can be used to reimburse the county for expenses.
And we have a focus group that's looking at that, and they're going to come back to us.
But I was told that there is no special fund. That's what Commissioner Williams told us. There is no special fund. So I'm just trying to find out where the money's at, where it's going to go. So guys,
Mr. Manager, go ahead.
I've got an emergency room appointment probably in the morning with an infection, so wrap up this.
Let the manager speak.
Mr. Rushing, and I cannot recall the last regular, it was either the last regular meeting or the meeting before that, where you asked about the $46 million COVID fund. And our CFO, Beverly Lyles, was sitting in the audience, and she came up and she answered your question very specifically and succinctly about the fund, how it's received, what account it gets put in. She stated it does not go into the county general fund, that the LGC, the accounting standards that they use, that they're held accountable to, a special fund has to be set up. That money is not received into the general fund. And we discussed at that time that Assistant Deputy Manager Lancaster was sitting right here, and she very clearly laid out what the process was going to be for determining what the recommendations, how the recommendations would be developed that would be brought to this board for final approval on how the funds would be allocated. There'll be an allocation recommendation coming to this board for all of y'all to review. Those monies are not part of the general fund, and that explanation was given
Until,
in an open meeting in this room.
until we put them there, which is what he just told us.
No, sir, it
told us
stays
if
in
we
the
put
special
them there,
fund.
they're
The
in there.
special fund,
Am I wrong?
the special fund is allocated. The special fund is where the monies are allocated into the special fund. If you choose to fund 10 different kinds of projects out of those monies, that's where those monies will be allocated into. But at the end of the day, the in and out monies out of that special fund have to be accounted for.
And it can be put into the 101 fund if we reimburse ourselves for last year's expenses.
It can only leave the multi-year fund per board action.
Right. So if
it's
the board
there,
votes to
guarded
do
until the
that,
board votes.
if the board votes to put it in the 101 fund, we can.
If that's the destination for it to follow the board's direction.
So it's not impossible that it can happen.
It has to go to specific purposes.
If it's to refund ourselves for expenses in 2021.
I don't want to speak to the details of the guidance of that.
Well, Michelle either told me privately or told us publicly that, yeah, it could be used to refund expenses from this year related to COVID, which is supplement for nurses for the schools, which we also gave a supplement for them, a bonus for the nurses. Wasn't as much, but it was still a supplement that we could refund ourselves some of that money. So, again, guys, enjoyed it.
Commissioner Williams, I believe you had something you wanted to say.
Yes, thank you. I just, I think it's important that we not lose focus on what we were here to learn and talk about. We were here to learn and talk about the facts of the fiscal year 2021 revenues because of what Commissioner Rushing had put out on Facebook about $35.5 million of money that we should have, but, you know, where is it? We all make mistakes. I hope Commissioner Rushing is at the point where he can at least acknowledge he was wrong on that calculation. He was comparing apples and watermelons. Because what bothers me most about this is that the conclusions that people are apt to draw when you put this kind of information out that is wrong, just straight up wrong, is that staff and your fellow commissioners are some combination of incompetent and corrupt. I mean, I read one of many comments that was on this thread. That is the conclusion that many regular people draw when they read this kind of nonsense. Now, it's easy, you know, and Commissioner Rushing seems quite adept, quite good at this, to point to other things and dance around. Well, what about this $23 million here? That's a pool of money. You know, that's something that's not secret. We've all known about it. We've known it's coming. That's very different from what he posted about $35.5 million that was available to us. And he put this out on a Saturday. I guess he expected staff to disabuse him, correct him on the weekend. No, he just put this out there and people can draw their own conclusions. It's reckless. I get that we all make mistakes. I make mistakes. But to put this kind of information out there, to draw the condemnation of people wrongly is just not how you conduct board business. It's not how you treat your staff. It alarms me. It alarms me. And Commissioner Rushing, I have a good deal of respect for you. You've got a lot of talent and intelligence. And there's a lot that we agree on, and I look forward to working with you on a lot of those items. But can we please just not engage in this kind of misinformation and behavior that impugns our reputations and the reputations of staff in such an undeserved way? That's what concerns me most. So, instead of talking about special revenue here and this item of debt service there, I think it's important not to forget what was said and the conclusions that regular people that aren't used to reading or don't have the inclination to read county financial statements are going to draw. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. With that, I will encourage anybody, we're not taking questions from the audience. After the meeting, I'll be glad to sit down and talk with you. But with that, I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
So
All in
moved.
favor?
Aye.
Okay.